Captain James Blackwood stood at attention in the grand throne room of Aldermere Castle, his polished boots reflecting the morning sunlight that streamed through the tall stained-glass windows. King Edmund sat upon his ornate throne, his weathered face etched with worry lines that had not been there just a week ago. The royal crown, usually gleaming with precious stones, now seemed dimmed by the monarch's troubled expression. "Captain Blackwood," the king's voice echoed through the vast chamber, "we have a situation that requires your particular skills and absolute discretion." James had served as the king's most trusted royal guard for 15 years. He had protected the royal family through 3 assassination attempts, recovered stolen diplomatic documents from enemy spies, and maintained order during the Great Rebellion of the northern provinces. But something in the king's tone suggested this mission would be unlike any other. The king rose from his throne and walked to a nearby table covered with various documents and maps. 3 days ago, during the routine inventory of the royal treasury, we discovered that several of our most precious family heirlooms have gone missing. These are not ordinary treasures, Captain. They include the sapphire of eternity, which has been in our family for 4 centuries, the golden scepter of Queen Isabella, and most importantly, the crown jewels of Princess Sophia. James felt his stomach tighten. Princess Sophia had been the king's beloved daughter, who died in a tragic riding accident 2 years earlier. Her crown jewels held not just monetary value, but deep emotional significance for the entire royal family. "Your Majesty, have we determined how these items disappeared? Was there a break-in?" James asked, his mind already working through the possibilities. King Edmund shook his head slowly. "That's what makes this so troubling, Captain. There was no break-in. The treasury seals were intact. The guards reported nothing unusual. It appears that someone with authorized access removed these items." The implications hung heavy in the air. Only 5 people had access to the royal treasury: the king himself, the queen, the royal treasurer, the master of arms, and Captain Blackwood. The thought that one of these trusted individuals might be responsible sent a chill through James. "Sir, what leads do we have?" James inquired, knowing that the king would not have summoned him without some direction. The king picked up a letter from the table, its elegant handwriting visible even from a distance. "Yesterday, we received this invitation from Lady Margaret Thornfield. She's hosting what she calls a private exhibition of rare historical artifacts at her estate in Ravenshollow. The invitation specifically mentions that she will be displaying recently acquired royal treasures of extraordinary significance." James studied the invitation as the king handed it to him. Lady Margaret was known throughout the kingdom as an eccentric collector of antiques and historical artifacts. Her mansion in Ravenshollow was rumored to house one of the most extensive private collections in the region. However, she had always been careful to acquire her pieces through legitimate means, making this development particularly suspicious. "The timing cannot be a coincidence," the king continued. "Lady Margaret has never claimed to possess royal artifacts before, and certainly nothing of this significance. We believe she may have our missing treasures, though we're unsure whether she's involved in the theft or if she's an unwitting purchaser." James nodded, understanding the delicate nature of the situation. "What are my orders, Your Majesty?" "You will attend Lady Margaret's exhibition tomorrow evening. Your mission is to locate and confirm the presence of our missing treasures, determine how she acquired them, and recover them by any means necessary. However, you must be extremely careful. Lady Margaret has powerful connections in the noble houses, and we cannot afford a diplomatic incident without concrete proof of wrongdoing." The king walked to an ornate wooden chest and withdrew a small velvet pouch. Inside this pouch are detailed drawings and measurements of each missing piece. Study them carefully. You must be absolutely certain before taking any action. James accepted the pouch and bowed deeply. "I understand, Your Majesty. Will I be going alone? Yes, but you won't be entirely without support. Sir William Ashford, our court historian, will accompany you as your cover. He's genuinely interested in historical artifacts, so your presence at the exhibition will appear completely innocent. He's also one of the few people who can verify the authenticity of the pieces if you locate them. As James prepared to leave, the king placed a hand on his shoulder. Captain, I cannot stress enough how important this mission is. Those treasures represent centuries of our family's history. But more than that, if someone within our inner circle is responsible for this theft, we need to know. The security of the entire kingdom could be at stake. James felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He had faced armed enemies and political conspiracies before, but this mission required a different kind of skill. He would need to be part detective, part diplomat, and part spy. That evening, James spent hours studying the detailed drawings in the velvet pouch. The sapphire of eternity was unmistakable. A brilliant blue stone the size of a robin's egg, set in an intricate silver pendant with tiny diamonds arranged in the pattern of constellation stars. The golden scepter of Queen Isabella was equally distinctive, featuring elaborate engravings that told the story of the kingdom's founding, with a unique twisted handle that no craftsman had been able to replicate. Princess Sophia's crown jewels consisted of a delicate tiara with pink diamonds arranged in a floral pattern, matching earrings, and a necklace that sparkled with rare white gems. As he memorized every detail, James couldn't help but think about Princess Sophia. He had been assigned to her personal guard detail during the last year of her life. She was kind, intelligent, and genuinely cared about the people of the kingdom. Her death had devastated not just the royal family, but the entire nation. The thought that someone might be profiting from artifacts associated with her memory made James's determination even stronger. The next morning brought unexpected complications. Sir William Ashford arrived at the castle with troubling news. "Captain Blackwood," he said, his usually calm demeanor showing signs of stress, "I've been making inquiries about Lady Margaret's exhibition, and I've learned something concerning. She's not just displaying the artifacts, she's planning to auction them off to private collectors from neighboring kingdoms." This changed everything. If Lady Margaret sold the royal treasures to foreign collectors, recovering them would become nearly impossible. The mission had just become much more urgent. James and Sir William spent the day planning their approach. They would arrive at the exhibition as interested collectors, with Sir William's reputation as a historian providing them credibility. James would pose as his assistant, allowing him to move around the estate more freely while Sir William engaged Lady Margaret and other guests in conversation about the artifacts. As the sun began to set over Aldermere Castle, James prepared for what could be one of the most challenging missions of his career. He dressed in the fine clothes of a nobleman's assistant, concealing his sword beneath his coat and carrying a small bag of tools that might be useful for recovering the treasures. The weight of the king's trust, the memory of Princess Sophia, and the responsibility to protect the kingdom's heritage all pressed upon him as he and Sir William set out for Raven's Hollow. The carriage ride to Lady Margaret's estate took them through the misty countryside, past ancient forests and rolling hills dotted with sheep. As they approached Raven's Hollow, James could see the imposing silhouette of Thornfield Manor against the darkening sky. The mansion was larger than he had expected, with multiple wings, tall towers, and countless windows that seemed to watch their approach like curious eyes. Whatever secrets lay within those walls, James was determined to uncover them and bring the royal treasures home where they belonged. The carriage wheels crunched against the gravel driveway as they approached Thornfield Manor. James observed everything with the trained eye of a royal guard, the placement of the guards, the layout of the grounds, potential escape routes, and security weaknesses. The estate was magnificent, but also fortress-like, with high stone walls surrounding the property and guards stationed at regular intervals. Lady Margaret Thornfield greeted them at the grand entrance. A woman in her 60s with silver hair, arranged in an elaborate style, and wearing an expensive blue silk gown, adorned with what appeared to be genuine pearls. Her smile was warm, but James noticed her eyes held a calculating intelligence that made him immediately cautious. "Sir William Ashford," she exclaimed with genuine pleasure, "how wonderful that you could attend my little exhibition. Your reputation as a historian precedes you, and I'm quite excited to hear your thoughts on my recent acquisitions." Sir William bowed gracefully. "Lady Margaret, the pleasure is entirely mine. May I introduce my assistant, James Crawford? He's been invaluable in helping me document and analyze historical artifacts." James bowed politely, playing his role as a scholarly assistant. Lady Margaret's eyes lingered on him for a moment longer than necessary, and he wondered if she sensed something unusual about him. Her smile never wavered, but there was something in her expression that suggested she was more observant than she appeared. "Welcome to Thornfield Manor, Mr. Crawford. I do hope you'll find tonight's display educational. We have some truly remarkable pieces that have recently come into my possession." As they entered the manor, James was struck by the opulence of the interior. The walls were lined with paintings, tapestries, and glass cases containing various artifacts. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over marble floors covered with expensive Persian rugs. It was clear that Lady Margaret had spent a fortune creating this private museum. The main exhibition was set up in the grand ballroom, where about 30 guests mingled around glass display cases. James recognized several faces from the noble houses of neighboring kingdoms, confirming Sir William's information about foreign collectors being present. This was definitely more than a simple exhibition. It was a high-end auction preview. Lady Margaret led them to the first display case with obvious pride. "This piece here is quite special," she announced, drawing a small crowd of admirers. "A ceremonial sword from the ancient kingdom of Valdris, dating back nearly 6 centuries. As she continued her presentation, James discreetly scanned the room for the missing royal treasures. The sheer number of artifacts made it challenging, but his trained eye methodically worked through each display case. In the third case, along the far wall, something caught his attention. There, nestled among several other pieces of jewelry, was Princess Sophia's tiara. James felt his heart rate increase, but he maintained his composed exterior. The delicate floral pattern of pink diamonds was unmistakable, exactly as shown in the drawings he had memorized. He moved closer, pretending to admire a decorative vase in the same case while getting a better look at the tiara. "Exquisite piece, isn't it?" came a voice behind him. James turned to find a tall man with a neatly trimmed beard observing him with interest. "I'm Lord Edmund Barlow from the Kingdom of Westmarch. I've been admiring that particular tiara myself. Lady Margaret claims it belonged to a princess, though she's been rather mysterious about its provenance." This was exactly the kind of information James needed. "Indeed. It's remarkable craftsmanship," he replied carefully. "Do you know if Lady Margaret plans to sell it tonight?" Lord Barlow nodded enthusiastically. "Oh, yes. It's one of the premium lots. The auction begins in about an hour. I'm told she expects it to fetch an enormous sum, given its royal connections." James excused himself and made his way toward Sir William, who was engaged in animated conversation with Lady Margaret near another display case. As he approached, he could hear their discussion about a set of medieval manuscripts. "The provenance documentation is fascinating," Sir William was saying. "Where did you acquire such detailed records?" Lady Margaret's smile flickered slightly. "I work with a very reputable dealer who specializes in high-quality pieces with excellent documentation. Mr. Victor Raven has connections throughout the continent." The name meant nothing to James, but he filed it away as potentially important. He caught Sir William's eye and gave him a subtle signal they had agreed upon earlier, a slight adjustment of his coat cuff that indicated he had found something significant. Sir William smoothly transitioned the conversation. "Lady Margaret, I'm particularly interested in any royal artifacts you might have. My specialty is documenting the movement of crown jewels and royal regalia throughout history." "How fortunate," Lady Margaret replied, though James detected a slight tension in her voice. "I do have several pieces that claim royal heritage. Perhaps you'd like to examine them more closely?" She led them to the case containing Princess Sophia's tiara, and James had to maintain strict control over his expression. Sir William examined the piece with professional interest, asking detailed questions about its history and documentation. "The previous owner provided certificates of authenticity," Lady Margaret explained, producing a folder of papers. "According to these documents, it belonged to Princess Elena of Morvanna, who lived in the 14th century. James knew immediately that this was false. Princess Sophia's tiara had been crafted specifically for her 18th birthday just 4 years ago, using techniques and materials that didn't exist in the 14th century. Someone had gone to considerable effort to create false documentation. As Sir William continued his examination, James noticed movement in his peripheral vision. Near the entrance to the ballroom, he spotted 2 men who definitely didn't look like typical collectors or nobility. They were dressed appropriately for the occasion, but their posture and the way their eyes constantly scanned the room marked them as security or possibly guards. More concerning was the fact that one of them was watching James specifically. "Mr. Crawford," Lady Margaret's voice interrupted his observations. "You seem quite interested in my collection. Are you looking for anything particular?" The question seemed innocent enough, but combined with the watching guards, James began to suspect that Lady Margaret knew more about his true identity than she was letting on. "I'm always fascinated by the stories behind these artifacts," James replied carefully. "It's remarkable how pieces travel through history, sometimes ending up far from where they originated." Lady Margaret's smile became more pronounced. "Indeed. Sometimes valuable items have quite adventurous journeys before finding their proper homes." The underlying tension in her words was unmistakable. James realized they might be walking into a trap, but he needed to locate the other missing treasures before they could consider leaving. Over the next 30 minutes, James systematically searched the remaining display cases while maintaining his cover. He found the golden scepter of Queen Isabella in a case labeled as containing medieval ceremonial objects from various European kingdoms. The elaborate engravings were partially hidden by the way it was positioned, but James recognized the distinctive twisted handle immediately. The sapphire of eternity proved more elusive. James had examined every case in the ballroom without finding it. Either it was in a different part of the mansion, or Lady Margaret was keeping it separate from the auction items for some reason. As the auction preparations began, with guests gathering around a podium that had been set up at one end of the ballroom, James found an opportunity to whisper to Sir William. "I've found 2 of the 3 pieces," he said quietly. "The tiara and the scepter are here, but the sapphire pendant is missing. The documentation is falsified, and I think Lady Margaret knows who we are." Sir William nodded grimly. "I've been thinking the same thing. Her knowledge of the pieces is too detailed, and she keeps asking leading questions about my interest in royal artifacts. We need to be very careful." Lady Margaret's voice rang out across the ballroom as she called for attention to begin the auction. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what I believe will be a truly memorable evening. Tonight you have the opportunity to acquire pieces of history that have never before been available to private collectors." As she spoke, James noticed that the 2 suspicious men had positioned themselves near the exits. Whatever was happening here, it was clear that Lady Margaret had planned for complications. The auction began with smaller pieces, building toward the more valuable items. James watched as artifacts that probably belonged in museums were sold to private collectors who would likely hide them away in personal collections. But his focus remained on the missing royal treasures and the growing certainty that this evening would not end as simply as he had hoped. When Lady Margaret announced that the next item was a magnificent tiara with verified royal provenance, James knew the moment of truth was approaching. He and Sir William would have to act soon, but with armed guards watching and 30 witnesses present, their options were becoming increasingly limited. The game of cat and mouse was about to reach its climax, and James still hadn't figured out who was the cat and who was the mouse. The bidding for Princess Sophia's tiara began at a price that would have fed a village for a year. James watched in growing frustration as foreign collectors raised their paddles, driving the price higher and higher. Each bid took the precious artifact further from his reach through legitimate means. Sir William leaned close and whispered urgently, "James, I've been observing the guards. There are at least 6 of them positioned throughout the room, and they're all armed. Whatever we do, it needs to be subtle." James nodded, but his attention was suddenly drawn to a commotion near the entrance. A late arrival was being escorted into the ballroom by one of Lady Margaret's servants. The newcomer was a distinguished older man with graying hair and expensive clothing, but something about him seemed familiar to James. As the man turned in his direction, James felt his blood run cold. It was Master Cornelius Blackthorne, the royal treasurer of Aldermere Castle, one of only 5 people with access to the royal treasury. The pieces of the puzzle suddenly clicked into place. Blackthorne was not here as a representative of the king or to recover the stolen treasures. He was here as a participant, likely the one who had provided Lady Margaret with the royal artifacts in the first place. James watched as Blackthorne approached Lady Margaret during a pause in the bidding. They spoke quietly for a moment, and James saw her nod and gesture toward a side door leading out of the ballroom. Blackthorne followed her from the room, and James realized this might be his only opportunity to uncover the full extent of their conspiracy. "Sir William," James whispered, "I need you to create a distraction. Something that will draw attention but not cause panic." Sir William looked alarmed but nodded. "What kind of distraction?" "Question the authenticity of the next item being auctioned. Use your reputation as a historian to create doubt. Make them stop the proceedings to examine the documentation more carefully." As Sir William prepared to act, James quietly moved toward the side door he had seen Lady Margaret and Blackthorne use. The auction continued with heated bidding for the tiara, providing perfect cover for his movement. The side door led to a narrow corridor lined with portraits of previous owners of Thornfield Manor. James could hear voices coming from a room at the end of the corridor. Moving silently, he approached and pressed his ear to the door. "The final payment will be transferred tomorrow," he heard Lady Margaret saying. "Your cooperation has been invaluable, Cornelius. Without your access to the treasury, this arrangement would never have been possible." Blackthorne's voice was nervous. "I still worry about discovery. If the king realizes what happened—" "The king suspects nothing," Lady Margaret interrupted. "As far as he knows, you're investigating the theft just like everyone else. By tomorrow, these items will be in private collections across 3 different kingdoms. Even if they're discovered, proving they came from Aldermere will be impossible." "What about the sapphire pendant?" Blackthorne asked. "You promised it would be included in tonight's auction." "I've decided to keep that piece for my private collection. It's too distinctive to sell safely, and frankly, it's too beautiful to part with. Consider it my bonus for arranging this entire operation." James had heard enough. Not only had he confirmed that Master Blackthorne was the traitor, but he had also learned the location of the missing sapphire of eternity. Now he needed to figure out how to recover all three pieces and apprehend the conspirators. Suddenly, he heard Sir William's voice rise above the auction proceedings in the ballroom. "I must protest. This documentation is clearly fraudulent. The metalworking techniques described here weren't developed until the 16th century. Yet this piece is claimed to be from the 13th century." Perfect. The distraction was working. James could hear confused murmuring from the auction guests and Lady Margaret's voice expressing concern about the delay. James quickly retreated from the door and made his way back to the ballroom where he found controlled chaos. Sir William had successfully stopped the auction by challenging the authenticity of a medieval chalice, and Lady Margaret was trying to maintain order while defending her documentation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lady Margaret announced with strained composure, "we'll take a brief intermission to address Sir William's concerns about the provenance documentation. Please enjoy the refreshments while we sort this out." As guests moved toward tables laden with food and wine, James approached Sir William. "Well done. I found Blackthorne meeting with Lady Margaret. He's the one who stole the treasures from the royal treasury. They're planning to complete their transaction tomorrow, and she's keeping the sapphire pendant for herself." Sir William's eyes widened. "What's our move?" "We need to recover the treasures tonight. Before they're sold or moved. I have a plan, but it's risky." James quickly outlined his strategy. While the guests were distracted by the intermission, he would return to Lady Margaret's private quarters to locate and retrieve the Sapphire of Eternity. Meanwhile, Sir William would use his academic authority to demand a more thorough examination of the tiara and scepter, giving James time to work and creating grounds for James to later claim they discovered the items were stolen royal property. The plan required perfect timing and more than a little luck, but it was their best chance. James slipped away from the ballroom and began exploring the manor's private sections. Lady Margaret's personal study was located on the second floor, behind an ornate door marked with the Thornfield family crest. The room was a treasure hunter's paradise, filled with artifacts, books, and documents that probably represented decades of collecting. In the center of the room sat an elaborate jewelry box made of polished mahogany with silver inlays. James carefully opened it, and there, nestled in blue velvet, was the Sapphire of Eternity. The brilliant blue stone seemed to capture and reflect every ray of light in the room, and the intricate silver setting, with its constellation of tiny diamonds, was exactly as he had memorized. As James reached for the pendant, he heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Moving quickly, he secured the sapphire in his inner coat pocket and positioned himself behind the study door just as it opened. Lady Margaret entered the room, followed by Master Blackthorne. "I assure you, Cornelius, this delay is temporary. Sir William Ashford may be respected, but he can't prove anything without access to the original royal records." "I don't like complications," Blackthorne replied nervously. "Maybe we should postpone the rest of the auction until this blows over." "Absolutely not. We've come too far to stop now. After tonight, you'll be wealthy enough to disappear to any kingdom you choose, and I'll have the finest private collection in the region." Lady Margaret walked directly to the jewelry box and opened it. Her scream of rage echoed through the room when she discovered the missing sapphire. "Someone has been in my study. The pendant is gone," she shouted. Blackthorne went pale. "How is that possible? Who else knows about it?" James realized he needed to act before they could raise an alarm or search for him. Stepping out from behind the door, he drew his sword in one fluid motion. "Captain James Blackwood, Royal Guard of Aldermere," he announced formally. "Master Blackthorne, you are under arrest for theft of royal property and treason against the crown." Both conspirators stared at him in shock. Lady Margaret was the first to recover her composure. "Captain Blackwood, I should have known. Your disguise was quite convincing, but there was something about you that seemed familiar." Lady Margaret Thornfield, you are also under arrest for receiving stolen goods and conspiracy to defraud the crown. Blackthorn suddenly bolted for the door, but James was faster. With practiced efficiency, he blocked the treasurer's escape and restrained him with minimal force. "You have no authority here," Lady Margaret protested. "This is my property, in my territory." "These artifacts belong to the crown," James replied firmly, producing the official documents King Edmund had given him. "I have full authority to recover stolen royal property wherever it may be found." The confrontation was interrupted by shouts from downstairs. Sir William's voice carried clearly through the manor. "Guards! These items are stolen royal treasures. I demand they be secured immediately." Lady Margaret's face went white as she realized her carefully planned auction was collapsing. The sound of running footsteps suggested that her guards were responding to the commotion, but from the shouting, it seemed the auction guests were in an uproar rather than following orders. James quickly secured Blackthorn with rope from Lady Margaret's collection of ship artifacts and turned to face her. "You can cooperate and face justice with dignity, or you can resist and face additional charges. The choice is yours." Lady Margaret seemed to age 10 years in that moment. Her shoulders sagged as the reality of her situation sank in. "How long have you known?" "I suspected when we received your invitation. The timing was too convenient. But I confirmed it tonight when I overheard your conversation with Master Blackthorn." Downstairs, the situation was resolving in James's favor. Sir William had convinced several of the foreign nobles that the artifacts were indeed stolen royal property, and they were distancing themselves from the auction to avoid diplomatic complications. Lady Margaret's guards, faced with angry nobles and accusations of handling stolen goods, had chosen to secure the artifacts rather than defend their employer. When James brought his prisoners downstairs, he found Sir William standing guard over the display cases containing the tiara and scepter, with several of Lady Margaret's own guards now working to protect the evidence. "Captain," Sir William said with obvious relief, "I was beginning to worry about your plan." "All 3 pieces have been recovered," James announced, showing him the sapphire of eternity. "And we have our traitor." The journey back to Aldermere Castle took place under heavy guard, with James personally overseeing the transport of both the recovered treasures and the prisoners. Master Blackthorn spent the entire trip alternating between attempts to justify his actions and desperate pleas for mercy. King Edmund received James's report with a mixture of gratitude and sadness. The recovery of the treasures, especially Princess Sophia's crown jewels, brought visible relief to the monarch's face. But the betrayal by a trusted member of his inner circle clearly wounded him deeply. "Captain Blackwood," the king said as James finished his report, "your service to the crown in this matter has been exemplary. Not only have you recovered irreplaceable family treasures, but you've also exposed a serious security breach that could have had far more serious consequences." James bowed respectfully. "I was honored to serve, Your Majesty, though I wish the circumstances had been different." The king walked to the window overlooking the castle gardens, where Princess Sophia used to ride her horse in the early morning. She would have been proud to know that her memory was protected by such dedicated service. In the weeks that followed, Master Blackthorn faced trial for treason and theft, receiving a sentence of life imprisonment in the castle dungeons. Lady Margaret, as a foreign noble, was sentenced to return all stolen artifacts in her collection and pay substantial reparations to the crown before being exiled from the kingdom. The recovered treasures were returned to their rightful place in the royal treasury, with additional security measures implemented to prevent future thefts. James was promoted to captain of the Royal Guard, with expanded authority over all matters of royal security. But perhaps most importantly, the memory of Princess Sophia and the honor of the royal family had been preserved. As James stood guard in the throne room, watching the morning sunlight reflect off the restored royal treasures, he knew that his mission had been truly complete. The sapphire of eternity once again hung in its place of honor, its brilliant blue depths seeming to hold all the history and tradition of the kingdom. The golden scepter of Queen Isabella stood as a symbol of royal authority and justice, and Princess Sophia's crown jewels remained as a beautiful tribute to a beloved daughter whose memory would live on in the hearts of all who served the crown. Justice had been served, honor had been restored, and the royal treasures had finally come home.